What's going on, y'all? We are back for another episode of the ReThink podcast.
Yes.
My name is Cameron Friend.
My name is Ferris Watkins.
And we are about to have an amazing episode. So the first season has been going great.
Yeah.
We had a lot of great guests, a lot of great conversation, but you know what? I might be the most excited for this talk.
Okay.
I feel like this is leaning into like my past. You know, we don't get a chance to talk about my career as a college football athlete or anything anymore. So we don't get a chance to talk about it, but we're going to talk about fitness. We're going to talk about health and wellness today. Yeah. And look, we have an amazing guest.
Who do we have?
We have Coach Andrew Paul from the Oklahoma City Thunder. Coach Paul, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thank you guys so much for having me. I'm honored that you asked, so I'm really happy to talk and have a good conversation.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We cannot wait to get into this conversation with you. We're so excited to have you on here. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Coach, I'm gonna go ahead and read through some bio real quick so the people can know who you are. All right, so we got Coach Andrew Paul is a senior athletic performance coach for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Andrew Paul is in his 5th year with the Oklahoma City Thunder and his 4th year as the current role as the senior athletic performance coach. In his position, Andrew oversees all aspects of the strength and conditioning and nutrition programs. Andrew also spent over 6 years at the University of Missouri, where he worked as the strength and conditioning coach for the football program, as well as several Olympic sports programs. Andrew received his undergraduate degree in exercise science from Missouri State University, is certified through the National Strength and Conditioning Association, and holds a doctorate in physical therapy from the University of Missouri.
That's amazing. That's amazing. It's giving credentials.
Right.
It always sounds a lot more impressive when you read it. It's not. It really is.
They said they don't know the work that went behind it.
Exactly. But we got to pay due to the work in order to get there. You know, it takes a long time to get in that position. You got to know a lot of people. That's a lot.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about your childhood. What was it like growing up?
So I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and like you guys, your family's from Atlanta. My whole family's in St. Louis. So we have about 50 family members in like a small, like 3-mile radius from one another. Wow. I'm the only one outside of St. Louis right now. So we had a very tight-knit family. And I got into, I guess I'll talk professionally. I played a lot of sports growing up, almost every sport you could, get your hands on. And I wound up, it honestly was my parents trying to get me, something to do in the summertime. And so we had our high school, our strength coach at our high school was running a summer strength and speed camp. And my mom just like really forced my hand and enrolled me in that one year. So I actually wasn't too happy about it, but it ended up being a really good thing. So I think I just got very, very lucky in that my high school strength coach just happened to be probably one of the best high school strength coaches in the country. And he's like right around the corner. Quickly became one of the more influential like male figures in my life growing up. Still talk to him, 38 years old. And I still talk to him for the last 20 years, almost, once a month or so, just by text or call him or see how he's doing. And he, like I said, he became a huge influential figure for me. And so I think, you learn a lot of how to become a grown adult and a man from your parents and your household. But you also, I think people usually have that figure outside of the house as well. And he became that, taught me a lot of things about, working hard, showing up every day, staying disciplined, doing your best, all things that seem really minimal. But at the end of the day, they're probably all that really matter. And I learned that when I was very young. So I was about 12 years old when he started working with me. And so, well, no doubt without him, I wouldn't have had a shot to play any sort of college sport. I was probably an average athlete, but I was able to play Division II baseball and Division I AA football in college. And I was just probably one of those players that like enjoyed training, enjoyed the process of getting better. I want to say not more than games, but like it was definitely a big part of my life. So it was just in my personality, and my college strength coach saw that in me. He went on to Mizzou, and when I graduated, I actually planned on being a teacher. I didn't plan on being a strength coach. So when I got done with school, he was running the intern program at Missouri, and offered me, but you go there and your main job is like picking up trash off the floor and wiping down the equipment at the end of the day.
You got to start from the bottom.
I did that. And I thought it was going to be a short-term gig, and I ended up staying there for a while in a variety of different roles. So yeah, that's kind of the story. Went to PT school when I was there, and I don't know how I wound up where I am today. It's kind of like a one day at a time thing. But I really believe that kind of the values that were instilled by my parents and like that one coach growing up, no doubt put me where I'm at today. There's not a single other person or incident I could point to that would explain how lucky I got to be where I am.
Well, what's so interesting about Ferris is, again, that's somebody who's been around that world, Division I athletics and even pro sports for a very long time. It's take a lot of dedication just to commit yourself to that craft. But it's another level of dedication to say, I want to go and be a strength and performance coach. I want to be the one to mentor. I want to be the one to teach. I want to be the one to learn and soak up the information, have to get the PhDs, have to excel in exercise science and kinesiology, all these other things. So for you, what was it that you fell in love with about the craft?
Like what was that part?
What woke up inside of you when you thought about it?
I think so. That's a good question, man. And I don't know if I can give a direct answer to that, but I do know that I loved the process of getting better and trying to make the most of yourself. But then I've seen people that try to get into this profession, and it's people that kind of enjoy working out, and so they want to make that their job. And that's not the job. And what I think, if I'm really like reflecting on what makes me happy at my job, it's like seeing another athlete or another person realize that in themselves. And I'll go back to, I always tell people the number one most influential figure in my life was my strength coach, aside from my parents, was my strength coach. And the power of it's not glamorous. It's not, underneath the lights, scoreboard's not on, but the power of teaching people the discipline of what it takes to have a long-term vision for yourself and run at it, and having them realize it and grow along the way is really, it's really an enjoying experience. It doesn't matter what level you're at, professional, college. I've worked with high school athletes as well. And I get the same joy of that no matter where I'm at. Just, helping someone along their own journey. It's a fun time.
Yeah. You know what that reminds me of, Ferris? It's just Dr. King, the drum major instinct. Just finding whatever you love, whatever you can excel at, and being great at that thing.
And that's exactly what you have done. So let's get into your actual professional career, what you do now. How did you fall into that? I know we talked about kind of like your foreground, but let's talk about your present. How do you enjoy what you're doing now?
I love what I'm doing now. I'm exceptionally lucky to have the job. I wake up every day and I don't forget that. I have a great deal of gratitude for the organization that hires me. And I'm fully aware that there's only 30 teams in the NBA, and my position happens to be one of those 30. So part of that is like gratitude. Part of that is like daunting. Like, let's go. Every day I got to bring my best. I don't know how I wound up here, but I do know I really enjoy working with our players, and it's a different job than college because they're at a different point in their life. College strength and conditioning is you're kind of the cultural leader in some respects to the teams you work with as a strength coach. And in this setting, you're kind of there for your expertise, and you're just kind of guiding these players in they're grown adults. A lot of cases, they have a lot more stresses than I have. So empathizing with them and just helping them make their life a little easier and guiding them along. And, that it's a different job, but it's really enjoying, it's really rewarding. Small things, watching a rookie get his next contract, that is generational wealth.
Which just happened for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Just happened. And like I always so that player earned it. But just being a small part of that and watching how that has the power to change his life, and then now he is using that to change the lives of so many people in his hometown, and keeping that big picture in mind is huge because the job is a grind, and it is a lot of travel, and it is a lot of this, like, different cities, 4 cities a week and things like that. And we had a game last night. We were at the arena I was at the arena till about 10:30, got up, and I was back at work at 8 o'clock this morning.
So it's one of those things, but to remind like the power that that this is a business, the power, I'm just one small piece of the power of how this business can change people's lives is pretty interesting. And to watch players change the lives of their entire family is pretty rewarding.
Yeah. It made me think about, you mentioned how, some of these athletes, they come in and, their job is to, do this, right? But then you also have to think about all of the other things that are going on in their home lives. And so when they come to you and they're like, listen, I'm not even in the mental space to do this. How do you help them do that?
Yeah. So a couple of things is that I view our job a lot of times is to make their life easier. So even if it's as simple as making sure that their schedule is lined up, and when they come in the weight room, that their workout is ready to go, their weights are on the bar, all they got to do is walk in and do that part of their job, that makes their life easier. So second thing is like, you have to empathize with these players and what they go through on a daily basis. They play, there's no one that's more naked than a professional athlete because they're on the floor under the lights. The second they're done, they're on Instagram. They're either getting hate messages or love messages or a combination of the two. And so their livelihood, and a lot of times their whole identity is in front of everyone.
It is
on TV. And so there's a level of empathy that you have to have, and then the relationship that you form with them on the front end is got to be one of genuineness and authenticity, and them as a human being first and a player second. So
that's important. That's very important.
The area of our organization I work for is called the Human and Player Performance Department. And the reason why it's labeled that way is because we work with humans first and players second. So understanding what makes them tick, what's their families like, and then when they come into work every day, making things easy for them, and just having basic conversation. They don't need to rehash the game, just like what their kids are doing that day. Just make them feel like people, I think really helps the situation for them.
What's fascinating is last week when we had a chance to do a Zoom, coach, I stated that like a strength coach, for me, I've always thought of like a barber, because when you go to the barber, you get your hair done. I mean, I
don't go to the barber.
Well, I mean, but you get your hair done, salon, something like that, right? This person spends 5-6 hours with you doing the hair, but then the barber, I mean, it might be like 45 minutes or so, but literally like you're right next to each other and you're talking through all this stuff. And the thing about strength coach that people don't realize is that when you spend so much time with your strength coach on the road, away games, when you're at home, but again, when you come into the facility, you're in the training room, you're having conversation with your strength coach still, you're having conversation with them on the sideline, you're warming up with them after the game, you're in the weight room, you're doing rehab with them, so you're always there. And so we spend so much time with you all, and that's why that natural relationship between players and strength coach is so important. And that's why your role is so important, because again, it's not just dealing with the athlete's bodies, but also even mentally, and establishing that relationship, establishing that friendship, and having that authenticity between them. And so I think a really important thing that you can touch on, even for people that are looking to get into the industry, that are trying to figure out, hey, this is a passion I want to pursue, you have to be keyed in on people. You have to care about people.
You do.
That's a great point. I think, for one, I mentioned this last time, was our last conversation was, our coach has figured out if he really wants to know the mood of the team, you go in the weight room and you ask the strength coach, like, how are the guys doing today? Because they will air it all out, and all good, all bad in the weight room while they're working out and within each other and everything. So, and we want that. We want them to feel like they're in an environment where they can speak freely. Nothing they say is going to be used, against them, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of conversations that go on. I think a big part of what makes humans are complex. And they need you to be different. They need you to be what they need you to be at that moment sometimes. And some of them need a friend, and some of them need a parent, and some of them need a true someone just to soothe their anxiety about an injury. A little bit of a counselor. And so understanding, what they need at that moment, what they're going to need in the big picture in the long term, and then what they need in that moment is really important. We had a younger player that was struggling. This just happened today. He was struggling with a situation in which he was kind of unhappy with his own, personal chef at his house. And he didn't know how to handle that conversation.
Wow.
And he's a young person. And his first reaction, they don't, I don't know if social media does it or what it is, but they don't know how to handle those conflicts face to face. And so just talking him through like how to start the conversation, how to lead it. And then it was like a very basic conversation that has nothing to do with weightlifting. And I don't know if he took the advice, but he seemed appreciative. But it's one of those conversations that has absolutely nothing to do with weightlifting, but it's obviously something that's going to wear on this kid's conscious as he's trying to figure out what to do about it. So you're right. Those are the things that happen in the weight room that largely go unthought of or unseen. But it's what makes the job, again, rewarding, and you have relationships with these guys that are totally unrelated to lifting weights and playing basketball.
That's so important, because it lets you know that your job is more than just what it is. Like you are really encompassing and taking care of these players more than just on a physical level, and that's so important. What would you say is like the hardest part of your job? Like, what is the hardest part of your career?
That's a good question. I don't think of things as hard.
And that's a good perspective.
Yeah, seriously.
Like I look at it's like I had this conversation. This is another conversation with a player. He had a little bit of a setback, and it wasn't a bad one. And he was kind of feeling bad for himself. But I look at things like the weather. I'm like, there's no good weather and there's no bad weather. It's just weather. Like, it just is. So I don't think there's definitely things that are challenging about the job. I enjoy that. I don't know if it's hard. Managing the outside, there's a lot of stakeholders surrounding the players, and making sure that it's got to be now I'm talking through it. There's got to be communication. I would look at as being, I guess, hard, but it's just part of the deal. There's a lot of stakeholders surrounding the players, and making sure you communicate with things in the right order so no one gets blindsided. I mean, it sounds bad, but the amount of money these guys are making, they're basically they're small businesses. And so I look at it this way, is that if you gave $1.8 million or for someone to look after, you would expect them to cover all their bases. And then communicate things properly, and you wouldn't want to hear about something bad happening to your $1.8 million without knowing about it through the back end. So trying to learn how to communicate, that was a big learning curve when I came from college to professional sports, is like learning the political and social dynamics between them, and then making sure everyone is comfortable with how that situation, including the player, that's the biggest stakeholder of all. Everyone is comfortable with how each situation is being managed. It's not hard. It's complex. There's a lot of moving parts there. So
I like that. And the reason I like that is because I don't know if I'm sure y'all, I'm not an athlete. I was in high school, but when you talk about just the mental aspect of it. You said, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. There are a lot of things that you have to do that we as onlookers never have to see, right? But we're benefiting from it. But what you said was that you never look at it as a problem. You never look at it as it's hard, which speaks to the mental endurance that you have already trained yourself to be able to combat. And that changes the way that you look at the world around you. I think that's something that we really should note. And I didn't want to pass by that.
That's good. I appreciate it. I mean, I agree. I think really learning what you can, if you want to last through the marathon of the NBA season, and understanding what you can and what you can't, and doing everything you can, in a good natured spirit to control the things that you can control is huge, and really not forming an opinion on the things that you can't, because there's going to be a lot. So.
Wow.
Yeah, that like I said, I just don't think of it as hard. I just think of it as it just is.
That's interesting. My head coach in college says something very similar. What he would always tell us is that we can control 3 things in life. That's our attitude, your effort, and your preparation. Because you can always control how you think about something. You can always control how prepared you are and how much effort you give. But outside of that, you can never control the weather. You can't control if somebody else is going to do their job, or if somebody else is going to show up, or even if you get hurt. It's just you can only control what's up here and how much you're willing to give and how prepared you are. And that really changed, I think, a lot of stuff for me. But I think that's such a great principle for people that are trying to even do the work of nonviolence. It's like, you can't control everybody. I can't control every situation. It's not going to be perfect. But what is your role in helping to solve these issues? You know, what is your role in contributing to society to continue the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the nonviolent movement? So I think this even goes into the next point, Coach. A lot of people, and especially let's say millennials and Gen Z, they've been trying to have different approaches to their health, to fitness. They're trying to discover, okay, like I want to make some changes, or even I just want to improve, or I want to work on certain things, but I feel like I don't know how. And again, a lot of that is the things they feel like they can't control, like what if?
Right.
What would you say to people, even young people especially, that are like, you know what, I want to take some steps in my fitness or in my health, my mobility, the way that I feel, but I don't know what to do. What would be some things you would say to them?
Man, that's good. First off, this generation is by far the most educated generation when it comes to health and fitness of any generation, far more than I was. And when I think about some of the beliefs that my parents held about what health is and what it isn't, I'm like so impressed when I talk to young people now, just because the amount of things they have. Like I work with young players, even though they're professionals at this point, and like I have to read up on some stuff that they bring to me because they have so much access to information that I'm like, I don't have an answer for you on that, but I'm going to find one. I'm going to read about this. I think the number one thing is, you know, I thought about this a lot. One of the bigger threats to the health and wellness area right now is almost going to be too much information.
Information overload.
Learning how to filter through what is real and what isn't is exceptionally difficult now. And I think I don't have a good answer for how to do that, because I'm not really in touch with all the information they get on like things like podcasts, Instagram and Facebook, and it's so much. But I think that's the number one threat is where you're getting your information from has to be checked. That's one. The second thing is that we are going through a little bit, and I think this should be embraced a little bit from a health standpoint, of like a food revolution, in my opinion. When I grew up, when I was a kid, that has been exceptionally good for the health industry, in my opinion. Embracing that as a young person is absolutely critical, because the food habits you form when you are young will follow you, you know, well into, you know, your adulthood. And we have former players that were young, athletic, and their eating habits. This is a big, even for our organization. You understand that the eating habits our players form when they're players are going to affect not just them, but probably their children also, because they're having kids, their kids are going to follow their parents. So, best I can tell, I'm a little bit disconnected sometimes. There's been a food revolution. I think that's hugely positive, because I think young people right now are truly forming not just their own eating habits going into their middle-age years and beyond, but also those of their children. Their children will watch, and it's a cultural thing. It's one of the hardest things to change when you're older.
Well, you know, it's so interesting, because there's even concepts such as food poverty, like where the way that you think about the way you think about food has been shaped, again, like your family structure, the society you come from, even the cities and the areas you live in. Obviously, when you're in the South, there's a certain recognition people have with food, as opposed to eating, you know, you're going to go to Boston or go to Seattle, you're going to get some lobster and get fish and all that other kind of stuff. So I even think what you said was so important, is just gathering good information and letting that good information even filter through what you eat, filter through your sleeping habits, you know, filter through your intake, drinking water, stuff like that. Like these are basic things. Again, sometimes it seems like a lot, but those are basic things that you can take hold of that can help change your life.
And I think to address, you know, why it's becoming more and more relevant to our generation now is because of Michelle Obama. That was her whole platform in terms of pushing, you know, better eating habits, more so for children in schools, but really that impacted a lot of us. I can remember being in college, and what we had around us was fast food, right? So if you're in college, you're a broke college student, right? You don't have a lot of money. And so for you're thinking, no, I'm about to go get this $5 box from Popeyes, because it's going to have some chicken, it's gonna have some fries, some red beans and rice, and that's gonna fill me, right? It wasn't until I got out of college when I realized that same community that I was living in was very much so rooted in vegan roots. And I didn't know how much that would change my life. Mind you, my mother is a vegetarian. But I never thought that that would get me full. I never thought that that was gonna change my life. And I'll tell you now, I am smaller now because of my eating habits than I was my freshman year in college. And it was just a shifting of my mind to say, hey, like, you know, even though I see the Popeyes right there, I don't necessarily have to go right there. I can go anywhere I want to go and still eat and still be nourished.
And I think a lot of this too, Coach, and please speak to this, is it's not necessarily that, you know, food itself is bad. It's just learning how to filter it and what do you need, and even learn how to eat in moderation.
Yeah, so that's good. I think I want to touch on a couple of things. One is that everyone usually wants to ask for exercise advice, and I always tell them, like, you exercise 5 days a week, 5 times a week. You're going to eat 5 times a day. So like learning how to manage that is a big deal. Secondly, is like what you're talking about is that, you know, you like when you form a food culture for yourself, you affect the food culture of people around you. And that is a very like that has a ripple effect first to your family and then to your friends, and that affects people. So for me, the things that I've learned the most growing up was that or in the last, I guess, growing up, things I've learned the most in the last 5 to 10 years is largely around kind of the sourcing of food that I choose, right? So like when you talk about, and I don't want to get too granular on this, but like when you talk about something as simple as burger, like a hamburger or beef, like whether that is a grass-fed or a grain-fed animal, you're dealing with apples and oranges as far as the content of that food and what kind of nutrition you're putting in your body. So paying attention to stuff of like how the animals are raised, are they being shot up with antibiotics on a massive farm or not? Those are things that kind of guide, you know, I find myself shopping at a lot more farmers markets and Whole Foods versus going to the grocery store and getting the Tysons and things like that. That has really been a point of emphasis for myself and for my family. You know, what kind of oils am I cooking with? Am I cooking with the vegetable canola oil, or am I cooking with virgin olive oil, avocado oils? Is that is again, those are apples and oranges as far as the effects it's going to have on my heart, on my blood sugar, things like that over a long period of time. So like understanding, like, again, I didn't want to get too granular on that, but that for me has been a huge eye-opening experience of reading up, educating myself. There's a book that's actually really easy to read called Food Rules by a doctor named Catherine Shanahan. That explains those concepts. And when I read that, you know, it explained a lot of the health kind of problems we have in my family with the older people in my family. And you know, you kind of want to halt that in its tracks for the next generation. So that's been a big point of emphasis for me, is understanding, not a big calorie counter of like, you know, trying to make sure I'm not eating enough, but making sure that what I'm eating is high quality.
Well,
you know what's so crazy is, you know, I'm not gonna lie to you, Coach. A couple of things you said, they touched me very deeply and very personally. First off, I grew up on Tyson's chicken, so like that was a hard thing to let go of. And you better believe on every. Now I don't want to say every black house has this. I'm not gonna say that, but a lot of them. Right next to your stove is some Crisco.
It's gonna be some
Crisco, because that's how you heat up that stove. Now I don't use it no more. But you better believe, when I grew up, I'm making some chicken, we frying some food, it's gonna be some Crisco by the stove.
And it's because, you know, a lot of people didn't know that there were other oils that existed, right? Like, who heard of avocado oil? Who knew that olive oil was more than just for your hair? Nobody knew those things. But we know those things now. Let me ask you this. I have a couple myths I want you to dispel. Does your body know what time you're eating?
It's a good question. So, I don't think it knows what time you're eating. There is, this is, again, I don't want to get too granular on this. The evidence for, I don't know if you guys heard about intermittent fasting, where you only eat hours a day. So I think that's where we're going. I don't know.
Yes.
So the evidence that is helpful is very, very high right now, and it keeps getting better. So the numbers for that are that it appears now that you want to get a couple times a week at least a 16-hour window where you're not eating.
Wow. Okay.
And at 16 seems to be in the research the magic number. Some people go as far as 24 hours for 1 day a week.
Okay.
But the research that is effective is coming from a lot of different places, and all the way down to when you don't have food for that long, your internal organs start to shed dead cells and kind of regenerate themselves that way. You naturally regulate your blood sugar throughout the day, which is a huge cause of diabetes, and restricting food for long periods of time kind of is like control alt delete for that process in your body. So like, I don't know when that time is of the day doesn't seem to matter as much.
Okay.
From what we read, but removing food for the magic number is 16, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, not every day, seems to have a lot of health benefits. I've learned to do it 3 times a week, where I'll eat an early dinner one day, and then I'll just kind of like eat a later breakfast the next day, and it kind of comes to 16 hours. So I'm not like,
that's very helpful.
And that's easy. That's easy to do.
Coach, how important is sleep to overall health and just really brain function as well? And Coach, again, I know you're still getting to know us a little bit, but he feels like he's about to get real detailed about stuff. Like, parents, we readers, we like information, so go ahead, spoil us. Go ahead.
So I mean, so the big ones are like we always hit are nutrition and sleep, right? So there are a couple key processes that only occur during sleep, and a lot of it is hormonal. So you produce a lot of your kind of rebuilding hormones, growth hormone being the primary one while you're asleep, and specifically during deep sleep cycles, which will take place over the course of about an 8-hour sleep day or sleep cycle. You'll have like 4 deep sleep cycles. So those seem to be the key times in sleep where those changes happen. And outside of that, there's also processes during sleep that help clean out harmful proteins in your brain.
Wow.
And specifically a tau protein that is linked to Alzheimer's is removed from your system during times of deep sleep. So we know we're pre-programmed. There's variation in sleep cycles in humans. There are some people that naturally can go off 5-6 hours of sleep. Interestingly enough, those people tend to stray towards professions that don't require a lot of sleep. Doctors tend to have people that a lot of like low sleepers are in that profession. But there's just like it's eight's kind of the middle range. There are people that require more than 8 hours of sleep, and they require 10 hours of sleep to be functioning. So everyone will kind of fall into their natural thing. My own personal philosophy for my sleep is that I never wake up to an alarm. And so I go to bed, I have a pretty good routine, right? I happen to need it probably more sleep than most people. I go to bed as soon as I can, and I try to plan my days where like I know I'm going to wake up naturally at 6:30 a.m. and like I'm not trying to set my alarm before that to wake me up mid-sleep cycle. It's funny because I don't know if you've ever experienced this where you've woken up naturally in the middle of the night and you were wide awake. And you went back to sleep and you woke up and you felt like crap. So what you've done is basically wake up at the end of one of your 4 or 5 cycles, and you're naturally awake. And then your alarm goes off when you're like halfway through a sleep cycle, and you wake up and you're like, where am I at right now? So that's an example.
I like that philosophy.
I love that.
I love that. Yeah.
That just looks like a whole lot. No, for real, because I do that every morning.
Wow. But you do what every morning?
So I wake up naturally around like between 3 and 3:16 every single morning. And I'll just be up. But I don't get up until my alarm goes off at 7:30 in the morning. And by the time 7:30 comes around, like I am dog tired again. So that makes sense now.
Yeah, that's just an example of, you're naturally set to wake up at the end of these cycles. So people will wake up occasionally at the end of one of them in the middle of the night. And then when their alarm goes off mid-cycle, they're like, and go back.
That makes a whole lot of sense. Okay. I had another question for you. I think, hold on, it slipped my brain. It had to do with the amount of times that you eat during the day. And I know you said like if you work out 5 times a week, then you need to eat 5 times a day. But what is it? Enlighten us on this notion of eating 3 times a day. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Enlighten us on that topic.
Yeah. So just to clarify what I was saying, I was saying, I always want workout advice. And I always tell them like the first thing you get in line is food. And the reason is you only work out 5 times a week. And that's a good week. You're going to eat 5 times a day. So clearly that's probably a more important.
Right.
There's just not a lot of current evidence to suggest that you need to eat 5 times a day. There is some thought processes around that. In the nutrition world, there's people study this for a living, and it's not me. And amongst the group that studies it for a living, that is their job, there is very little consensus outside of calories do matter.
Okay.
The intermittent fasting concept is there's a lot of science to back that up. And there's a lot of science to back up the sourcing concept. So food sourcing, how many meals you eat a day, there really isn't a whole lot of strong evidence to suggest that there's a certain number of times a day you need to eat. The interesting thing about the breakfast is the most important meal of the day. The background of that comment is not the science world. It is the wheat lobby that made cereal for the first time.
Wow.
They was hustling us as kids.
God.
Yeah. They sold my parents a vision.
Hey.
Oh wow.
Your kid is gonna have this breakfast cereal and milk.
I learned that a few years ago where I'm like, where did that come from? Because I'm hearing like intermittent fasting, you don't eat breakfast and all this stuff. And I was always told it is the most important meal of the day. Now, if you were an intense athlete, you're doing, this is for general health, different. If you have a competition that day, there's a strong evidence to suggest that eating upon waking is going to help performance later on in the day. That's a little bit different than general health. So I kind of separate those in my mind. I'm no longer training for like any sort of major event, even though sometimes I like to think I am, and I'm like trying to happen again. So I tend to take my advice from the general health area. And that's just one thing I learned was that that phrase was coined by along with the invention of cereal.
That is amazing. Wow. Okay, my last question. Okay, last myth. Well, it's not really a myth. About eating to your blood type. Can you enlighten us on that?
I don't know much about that.
Okay.
That's actually something that an athlete has brought to me recently, and I am looking into. I don't feel educated enough to say anything on it. I just haven't seen anything of like a credible source on that yet.
But that's also how you know this is somebody you can rock with, because he can tell you, I know this, but if I don't know this, I'm gonna find out for you. So that's amazing. Well, Coach, again, thank you. You've been dropping so many gems on us today. Even just sharing your story, how people can even think about the industry if they're thinking about getting in the industry, but then talking about sleep and nutrition and all that and overall fitness. So last question that I would have for you, and again, if you heard of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a child, as a man, obviously, has Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has Mrs. Coretta Scott King, the civil rights movement, nonviolence, has that legacy had any impact on your life or your career? And if so, even just like what has that meant to you personally?
Oh my gosh. For one, absolutely. I can't say that there's a single person that hasn't touched in some way. And maybe I live in a bubble, but like that for me was, Martin Luther King is one of the first people you learn about growing up in elementary school. So, I think the one thing that I learned growing up from my parents, and then that was reinforced the message of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was, the concept of treating everyone based on their character. Number one, that's going to be one, what I was raised to do, and two, I'm about to have a child.
Oh wow!
So my first child is coming in February, and
congratulations.
That has to be the core to what my wife and I would like to teach this person to be, and be a model for treating everyone based on the content of their character, and always how to say this, but being on the right, like being on the right side of the future, is something that I hope to God I could instill in my child. So, and no doubt, like I can't say enough about, how my parents raised me to do that. I feel like they did a great job, and how I hoped I could be a parent and kind of give those same values to my child. So
that's amazing.
That is amazing.
Well,
we thank you so much for all of your words that have helped us, helped me personally, because now I know exactly when I need to wake up and not keep snoozing my alarm. But thank you so much for everything that you have given us today. I pray that our words have encouraged you as well, and seeing how, because the fact that you work for an organization where human comes before player is it is literally the exact thing that my Uncle Mel was talking about. You have to look at people as humans first before you look at them in any other aspect, be it their profession, be it their look, the color of their skin, right? Like you said, the content of their character matters more than the color of their skin. And you practice that definitely every single day. I'm sure you walk in to your job every day with different players and
different backgrounds, different countries, different languages, all that.
The way that you have to kind of have a blank canvas and say, no, I'm going to treat you just like a human first. No matter what's going on outside of this gym, whatever is going outside of this arena, we're focused on what we need to do today. And so that takes a lot of courage. I commend you for that.
So thank you again, Coach. This has been amazing. It's been an amazing discussion, and I can't wait to let other people listen to this, because they're definitely going to be blessed by it.
Well, thank you guys. And it was really cool for me to hear about kind of the legacy of your family living on right now. That's all living in Atlanta. You're carrying the message on through podcasts. That's amazing, man.
We tried. This was Cameron's brainchild. This has
been great. We have a great team that's putting all this stuff together. Ferris has been great. Our team that's putting all together. I mean, this has been amazing. So, Coach, really just heartfelt. This means a lot that you said yes to this, and obviously just coming from a background, we're what you're doing now. I really appreciate the work that you're doing, because to this day, my life is still being shaped by strength and conditioning coaches that have laid the foundation for me, even outside of being an athlete. So, your job is of the utmost importance. So again, thank you for all that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm honored you asked me to be on this. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, y'all, hey, look, that's the next episode of the ReThink podcast, man. This has been amazing conversation. Be on the lookout, because we're coming back up soon.
Peace.